it's Nicole for Lawnfawn, and today's card features the new How Have You Been stamps and coordinating dies, as well as the shaker add-on dies. And it features this little jar that is a shaker with jelly beans in it. So super cute and fun. And you can choose to customize the jelly beans with the little faces or not, depending on what you want to do. I love the little faces. I think they're really fun. A couple years ago, I did a gumball card and did the same thing. And it's always been one of my favorites by customizing the gumballs with the faces. And so I wanted to do that here. I'm going to start by stamping the jar, the lid, and one of the jelly beans. I'll need a whole bunch more of those on some smooth white cardstock. And then I'm going to die cut that initial frame using the jelly bean shaker add-on. That's going to create that frame. If you did not want to do a shaker, you could just use the die that coordinates with the How Have You Been stamp set and go from there and do a flat style card. I also created a sandwich from Fun Foam and Stick It and die cut that so that it'll be a layer. I've also die cut a background for the shaker from the solid shaker piece from the shaker add-on, and a die cut that same solid piece from a piece of transparency for the whole shaker. And I'm going to set all of that aside and color that in a minute. I also have stamped the kind of group of jelly beans plus some additional single ones on that Nina Solar White cardstock, and I'm coloring those in with Copic markers. I've used the Lawnfawn Jet Black ink to stamp all of my images. It works perfect for Copic coloring. It does not bleed. It's just incredible. I'm going for a pretty traditional kind of jelly bean mix, I think, here, with orange and red, yellow, green, and pink. Originally, I tried to use a little bit too light of a pink for my base color. I'm only using about 2 shades per color family, and I was having a hard time blending it. So you're going to see the pink jelly bean get a little bit darker as I adjusted that to a little bit darker, lighter color, if that makes sense. And that I really think it works a little bit better. I am going to color all of these in. I am speeding through it just to kind of help make the video a little bit shorter. Very simple coloring, very simple shading. The real fun factor, I think, for these jelly beans is going to come in those extra little steps here at the end where I'm going to create some little highlight areas, and that's going to make the entire thing pop. Otherwise, it's fairly simple looking, and creating the little highlights is really simple as well. There's a couple different ways you can go about doing that. I'm using both of the ways. You could use them on their own if you wanted to as well, but I like to take a colorless blender and add a little highlight, and it's going to kind of move some of that ink away from where you lay down the colorless blender. The colorless blender is not really a blender at all. It just moves that ink away. So I did that on some of these. Here I'm going to show you I'm doing it on a few more of the jelly beans. And that ink just kind of gradually moves away. Then over that area, I'm taking a white opaque pen and adding even more of a highlight so there's real definition to that. So I'll do the same thing with these jelly beans. On the darker ones, you're going to see it a little bit more. As that ink dries, it's just moving that ink away that I've already laid down. Then the white opaque pen over it to really make those highlights pop. Go ahead and trim apart all of my dies that I'm going to need here. I need that group, and I also need the single jelly bean, and I will die cut both of these, or all of these, I guess I should say. Then I'm going to take the adorable little faces, and I'm just going to mix and match those all over. So kind of gonna start with one and work my way through all of the jelly beans until they all have faces. For the little face that has a tongue sticking out, that first one I stamped, I did color in the tongue with a red Copic marker, the R46 Copic marker. I think that adds a lot to that particular design. For this group of jelly beans and also the single shakers that I'm going to put in the jar shaker, I am not going to put a layer of glossy accents on them. I could, but I really feel like it's going to make anything in the shaker stick. Even when the glossy accents is all the way dry, I just didn't want that added layer inside the jar. I wanted my jelly beans to shake around. And I'm not doing a ton of extras. I'm only doing 3. I felt like that's all I needed for this particular shaker since I did the grouping. I just wanted some sort of movement inside of the jar shaker. But for the jelly beans that are going to be laying out in the grass, I am going to be adding glossy accents on top of those. And that's just going to give them a little extra shine and a little fun dimension. Go ahead and fill in the faces for the rest of these little jelly beans here. Make sure get the tongues all colored in. Then I'm going to just do a really light blue-green, very, very light, just along the edge where the glass is. There's not a lot you're going to see there. Also do a little gray for the top of the jar. And for the jar lid, it's going to be even darker. I'm using some cool grays to color this in. And then once I kind of have everything all ready to go, I will put a little Wink of Stella clear glitter brush pen over the jar lid, and it's going to give it a little subtle sparkle and shine. Instead of putting the lid on my jar, it's going to be tipped off to the side in the grass, and of course I'll have jelly beans spilling out into the grass, which I think is kind of fun. For the background, I am going to lay down just a little bit more of that blue-green 000, and my marker is getting a little dry. I definitely need a refill. I went over this with my colorless blender. It only gives a hint of color. I probably could have even gone darker. I didn't. Most of the shaker is taken up with the jelly beans, so I didn't worry about it much. My background was created from the large stitched rectangle die, the A2 size die cut from some of my very favorite new pattern papers from the Watercolor Wishes collection. So the background's kind of a teal blue sky. I die cut another rectangle from one of the light green papers and then took the simple grassy hillsides new dies, and using one of those, I went ahead and created 2 borders to tuck my jar and jelly beans and all of that in. I'm going to grab my Misty now, and on my background, I've laid out a couple of the greetings from the How Have You Been stamp set, plus I'm going to grab a scripty hello greeting from the Yay Kites stamp set, previously released a few months ago, but I love how it works with the rest of the greetings I'm using here. So the greeting will read, hello, bean meaning to say how you been. And I just think it's cute. It's a fun little kind of punny play on words and just super cute, like lawnfawn is known for. I'm going to start with the 2 phrases from the How Have You Been stamp set. I'm using the Misty to stamp those on my background. I'll go ahead and remove those and then stamp the scripty word with the lawnfawn mermaid ink. I did that twice to make it nice and dark. The background grass, the taller one of the 2, is going to be adhered directly to the background rectangle. And then I'm going to put 2 layers on the back of the grass. I'm only showing 1 here, but once I got my shaker put together, the fun foam was thick enough I really needed 2. So I ended up having to pop off that top layer. I used a little undo to do that, and go ahead and pop that grassy layer up a little bit more. I'm using some of the ScraPerfect Best Glue Ever to attach the transparency to the back of the jar frame. Removing the backing paper from the sticket that I used or adhered to the fun foam. I'm going to take a powder tool and just run that all around the edges. Hopefully the jelly beans won't stick to the edges that way. Adhere my jelly beans, the grouping of them, to the background. I'm going to put 3 individual jelly beans in the shaker. Before I do that, I think they all need faces too, to kind of go with the whole theme I've got. So I'll go ahead and add faces to these three little guys before I put their shaker together. So again, just adding those little faces to each of these. I really love that you can customize them if you want to, or you do not have to use them. It gives you a lot more options with a single stamp set. Without the faces, it could be a little less cutesy. So if you don't want to add those, you don't have to. I'm going to go ahead and put the jelly beans in the shaker, remove the other side of the stick-it, and then take the backing or the backer to the shaker to the jar and flip it over. Super easy to create an adorable little shaker there. So here's where I want to tuck that jar into my grass, and I realized that it was going to look kind of funky. So I am going to double up the fun foam on the back of that grass border. I'm going to tuck my jar here, and then I did take some undo and pop off that top grass layer and just doubled up the adhesive. That way I didn't have to redo anything or tear up my whole background. I also tucked my jar lid in there, used a little foam adhesive to tuck it behind the grass. I'm using that Best Glue Ever from ScraPerfect to attach the single individual jelly beans all over my background, adding faces to those as well. Little images like this or little die cut stamped images that are really difficult to put a tape runner on the back of, a liquid glue will work perfect. I use lots of different glues, but this is a fantastic glue. It dries matte and clear, so you're not going to see it if any of it maybe gets outside of the edges a little bit. I'm also adding highlights to all of these jelly beans, faces to all of these jelly beans. I did stamp and color a few additional jelly beans, more than what I had originally done at the beginning of the video, because I really felt like I needed a whole bunch out in the grass, almost like the jelly bean jar exploded everywhere. Probably it would have been easier if I had added the glossy accents to these and let it dry and then glued them to the page or to the card, but I adhered them and then realized I really wanted to add glossy accents, so I'm just kind of carefully going to do that, and I'll show you that a fine tip that is really going to make it easier. It's the No Clog writing cap from ScraPerfect, and it creates a nice fine line of glue. Before I do that, I am going to add a few sequins to the background using the Best Glue Ever from ScraPerfect. And to pick up my sequins, I'm using the ScraPerfect Embelly Jelly. You can just take a little bit of this sticky material, put it on the end of the craft stick here, and then pick up your sequins really easily. You don't have to try to pick them up with your fingers, and place them where you want them to go. So I put little dots of glue on the background, and then I'm simply placing my sequins over those little dots of glue with that little Embelly Jelly tool. Do a few more up above and also a few down in the grass to kind of even it all out really nicely. And that one, I should not have touched it with my finger. My finger was sticky, so it kind of came up. Just a few more down here. I always like to add a little scattering of something. I felt like it needed just a little something. These are some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. Once I have all of those in place, I am going to take that No Clog writing cap from ScraPerfect and twist it onto the top. Here is that Wink of Stella clear glitter brush pen, and I'm coloring the cap or the lid for my jar. It's going to give it just a little subtle shine. And then I'm taking some tweezers, removing the cap from my glossy accents, the little mini, and then you can see it'll draw this really fine, thin line. You can use it on all kinds of different products, glitter glues or things like that, that this cap will fit. I just put it on my glossy accents because it's got this great little lid with a needle that will help keep it from clogging. That's why it's a no clog. It's fantastic. Drawing a little glossy accents over each of these jelly beans. I'm going to set that aside to dry, place this whole thing on a white side fold card base, and that will finish up this jelly bean shaker card showcasing the How Have You Been stamps and dies and shaker add-on dies from lawnfawn. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.